Ooh, ooh, ooh. There's only one of you, so tell us your story like only you do. We're on the same team of dreamers, a happy, scrappy group of believers. So come, play a part. There's room for mistakes and messes and art. Who cares if there's not many takers? We're doing it for the makers.
Hey, you guys, welcome to the For the Makers podcast. I hope you all are having a wonderful day today. I'm so glad that you're here with us. I'm Elizabeth Etheridge, one of your co-hosts, and I'm also joined here by my other co-host,
Rachel Gifford.
Hey.
Hey.
How you doing, bud?
I'm so good.
Good. I'm so glad. You guys, I'm so happy that you're here with us today. Just a little reminder, we release our episodes every second and fourth Friday of the month, because we all know that you clap on the 2 and the 4,
Not the 1 and the 3.
So expect that every Friday, the second and fourth week. You guys, we have a really great guest here with us today.
Yeah, we're really excited about this one.
We're pumped about it. Kimberly Yates is here with us, and so Rach, can you give us a little little bio,
a little cold read?
Yeah, give it to us.
Here we go. Kimberly Yates is a New York-based actress. Some of her favorite projects include the LA premiere of The Mistakes Madeline Made by Elizabeth Meriweather, creator of New Girl, the New York premiere of Fabuloso at the Irish Repertory Theatre, The Cherry Orchard playing opposite Jim Parsons, the Woolgatherer playing opposite Bradley Cooper, playing alongside Sue Galloway in The Wonder of the World, and Criminal Minds, Kirsten Vangsness in The Invisible Play. She can be heard in tons of anime features, including Evangelion, big deal, Gunsmith Cats, and Read or Die, for which she won the Dubbie Award for Best Voice Actress in a Leading Role. Kimberly, that's awesome. She's the acting coach for clients including A$AP Rocky, Jack Whitehall, and 2-time Emmy winner Tamara Braun. One of the founding members of the improv team High Status and their spinoff podcast called High Tea. I love that so much. She gave a TED Talk called Relearning Forgiveness, which we will link that in our
100%.
podcast description. We love a TED Talk.
Yep.
She graduated with a Masters of Sacred Theology from General Theological Seminary in May of 2022 and won the historic Seymour Prize for Extemporaneous Preaching. She has written the book Rivers of Life, a 40-day devotional, the film Relatively Speaking, starring Jim Parsons, and was commissioned to write the short film Kissing. She has recently workshopped her first full-length play, Joie, a play about suffering. It is based on the Chagall painting named Joie, so if the title is hard to pronounce, blame it on him. I love that. Kimberly, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
I am so excited too. So we know each other from the first, right?
Yeah, the first workshop of Joie.
And
the second.
And the second. Yeah, I guess we can, it almost feels like the extended of the first. But
yes.
So we met through a mutual friend of ours, Josh Dunn, friend of the podcast, as we're saying.
He's the glue
he
of
is.
the world,
Josh
kind of.
I was about to
literally
say,
knows everybody.
You know how we met, which was insane? He worked for me. I was producing an event for American Express in the U.S. Open.
Oh my gosh.
Wait, really?
Yes.
Yeah, and so he was a PA for me.
Oh my gosh.
And we got to talking about his dance, and I was like, I have a part for you.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yep. Yeah, and then Josh joined in the second workshop for Joie.
So when he couldn't do the first workshop, I was like, well, you have to make it up to me. So like, give me some names.
Yeah, exactly.
And now there's like this beautiful like Joie community that has formed that I just love, because then everybody... Well, will you tell us a little bit about it? Because it's a devised, or part of it is a devised play. And I don't think a lot of people know what that means.
Sure. It's a hybrid play. So part of it is traditional, like a traditional just written play. Part of it's devised and part of it is improvised. And I didn't do this on purpose. I didn't do this to be like exciting because everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is so cutting edge. I did not do it to be cutting edge. It was just the story, and it's what the story required. It's a story that happens in multiple worlds. It happens in our world and otherworldly place. And it just, that's what it needed to be.
Right. Yeah.
And so, wait, what am I supposed to be saying about it exactly? Oh, just what devising is.
Yeah.
So, devising is different from improvisation. So, improvisation is new every time you see it, right? Every night. Devising is completely set.
Right.
But what I like to think about it is devising is like the rehearsals are improvised.
Totally.
You start with a source, like whether it be a play, like source material, a play. The most commercial version of it is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. That was on Broadway in the West End. And so they tend to lean towards very multimedia, movement-based stuff. So in that one, in The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, the main character was an autistic boy. And so it kind of created what it was like to be inside of an autistic mind.
Right.
And devising is really good for that. So in my play, spoiler alert, spoiler. Should I give a spoiler or no? I'll just say that we end up in another world.
Yeah.
And so
that's good.
So to create this other world, I was like, well, whatever I create behind this computer is not going to be as exciting as if I get a bunch of other brains.
Right.
Because it just needs to be weird. But because I'm casting actors who are subject to gravity and they have human bodies,
Totally.
like we're actually on this planet. So how do we create another world?
Right.
And devising is great for that because devising, it's not only that it's improvisational in rehearsals, but the core of it is really about a democratic process. So whereas normally creatives like the costume designer, the lighting designer, the director, the producer, they all have meetings.
Right.
And then the dramaturg or whoever describes the world to the actors, and then they rehearse, and those groups, the creatives and the rehearsers, are separate.
Right.
Most of the time in devising, which is why it's such an expensive process and long and sometimes a lengthy process, is the creatives are in the room with the actors.
Yeah.
So the costume designer might get an idea and throw you a shoe, and then you do something and the lighting designer gets an idea. And that's why they tend to be multimedia.
Right.
Because the designers are in the room. So
Yeah.
Oh, I never thought about that aspect of it, that they tend to be multimedia because of that fact. Interesting.
That's really cool, especially when it comes to like with Curious Incident of Dog in the Nighttime. I'm a huge Marion Elliott fan directorially. I am obsessed, a little low-key obsessed with her. I love her so much. So like seeing The Curious Incident of Dog in the Nighttime, all of the multimedia that's involved in that, like the lighting with the track on the floor and like all of those different things, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about the like such intimate collaboration between the performers or playmakers, and then the designers.
Absolutely.
And the people listening can go and look up YouTube, and there's some great clips of their rehearsal process. And I think what works so well about that one, I think devised work works the best. Well, actually, I'm going to say anything. I love when function and form kind of come out of narrative. So the reason why I think it works so well for Curious Incident is because it's not just, wouldn't it be cool to make this look cool?
Right.
It's like we want to, the book itself is inside of his brain.
Right.
I haven't read the book, but I believe it's first person. So they'll talk about in some of the interviews, like how do we bring an autistic, I think he's maybe like 11 or 12, 13-year-old boy's mind to life? How do we let people know what it would be like when he's in a train station running away from home,
right.
one of the biggest train stations in London,
right.
when someone who feels sensory input more than the average person, how does that feel to him? And how do we make the audience, so not just like, wow, it'd be cool if if a little kid's walking through and people are picking him up and there's light shining and stairs are appearing out of nowhere.
Right.
Yeah.
It's for a reason. It's because we are trying to feel what it would feel like to have sensory overload and be lost and be alone and be a child.
Right.
And much the same way with Joie, with the project Rachel and I are working on. we're going to a different world, and humans are going to a different world. So it's inviting the audience into this really just different way of being.
Totally.
So the devising was, we want to make it feel really not just foreign, but it starts out pretty magical and pretty Disney. There's some other elements, which we won't give spoilers away, but devising really came out of it just because it was like, well, how do I bring this to life?
Right.
Because it needs to be, I can't just say on the page. So when you read the script, it'll say, please make this to everyone. So part of our rehearsal process, I drove them crazy, probably ask a million times, what are your special skills? Send me your special skills. Even if you don't think it's a special skill, really pushing them into deeper levels where they hadn't even thought of what a special skill might be.
Totally.
So for instance, Josh, who we talked about, he can make realistic bird sounds. And I don't mean like tweet or where people, the first time we did it, people are looking around, was a window open?
Yeah.
It's that, and they can be really subtle, they're really quiet, and he making them bigger, and it's more than one bird at one time, which is crazy. And so that suddenly gets written into the play.
Totally.
Or like Sophie, one of our actresses who's now touring with Jagged Little Pill.
Yeah,
Sophie Lee Morris.
Yeah.
She, I was working on a thing with her, and she goes, well, I don't know if this is a special skill that counts, but I'm a songwriter. I'm like, that counts. And we were working on a piece because when you devise, we give you little assignments and you break up.
Right.
And then as we were working on the piece, it was me and Sean and Sophie, Sean Evans. Shout out to him, great actor.
Love you, Sean.
He and when we were looking for music, because often you start with music when you're doing these little vignettes while you're rehearsing, and she said, well, I wrote a song that kind of goes with this. And so she sang a version of it, like a cappella, taught us some of it. It became part of our little vignette. And they say when you're devising, you have to be willing to let go of 95% of it.
Right.
Like you have to assume you're only 5% is going to be usable. I think we had a much higher ratio than that.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I would say so.
And then, so Sophie's a reworked version of part of her song a cappella ended up in the show, and will probably be there forever, be a part of it now. She has a little writing credit in it.
Right. Yeah, it's really cool. Sorry, Rich, were you going to say something?
No, go for it.
Okay. How I met you was at the very first, or one of the first Le Joie presentations. I came to see her, and she had been telling me all about the process and what was going on, and I was like, I have to come experience what is going on. And so as an audience member, I think it was really cool to see something feel so otherworldly, because we're so used to being in our world that being thrust into a totally different environment with totally different rules really stretched me even as a person, but also as an artist, because it made me be like, okay, especially doing it without a set and without lighting and without costumes or any of that, I had to picture everything that was going on, what everything looked like in my mind, which was really cool, because then it sparked a lot of really great conversation afterward with a bunch of our friends. We were like, what do you think this was like? Or what did this invoke in you? Or what was this like for you? Which was really cool. So props. It was really awesome.
Yeah. And I as an actor and being a part, I had never done devised work before, and it's such a gift to just be given this playground of okay, let's just make up something about this, and this. You have to get from point A to point B, and you have to include, we'd put in a couple rules or something, right?
Yeah,
so
there'd always be rules that might be there has to be contact improv in it. Mm-hmm. You have to have half of a song, 3 spoken lines. Yeah. Maybe someone has to make someone else a sculptor. There's a language of devise, there's exercises, mm-hmm. and there has to be a little ditty in it. Someone has to hop on one leg, whatever. You tend to give 10 things.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, now you have 20 minutes to go and bring back a 2-minute piece.
Right.
And what's fantastic, I was just meeting with the director right before I came here, and he we were talking about how the purpose of all of that is to get you out of your mind, out of your, like, not out of your mind like crazy, but like, like separated from the point A to point B, right? We were talking about how we both are method trained, he and I, and we were talking about how it's the opposite of the method, but in trying to kind of get to the same, using transference is what he said, still using a type of transference, but whereas the method is going back in your own life and your own experience and using the sensory and emotional cues from that and bringing them into the present day, this is completely getting away from your own experience. You try to really overwhelm the performer's mind. You give them so many things. In fact, we were talking about how the rules themselves are not that important. Like, it's not so important that you fit in all 10 things. The reason why you fit in all 10 things is because you want to short circuit the thinking. We in the Western world, we're brain dominant, right? And we're information dominant, and we're linear narrative dominant. And so it's to short circuit that and find that childlike creativity.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've been studying the Meisner technique over the last 2 years, and it was cool to see there are some parallels because Meisner is kind of going away from, there's a lot of let's fill your brain with other things rather than going method.
Sure, right. Rather than going inside.
Right, exactly. And so it's interesting in the process, kind of seeing some of the crossovers, but it just takes you back to the childlike wonder and imagination. My imagination was so challenged in the best way, and it just got me to be so much more creative. And then, kind of interestingly enough, that has helped me so much in acting, just period, right?
Oh wow.
Because it's like that muscle. I feel like sometimes, if you don't work it, it's like anything else. It's just kind of you need that challenge sometimes to keep your mind sharp.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to change directions.
You off 3 times in this conversation. I'm so sorry. I think as artists, as creatives, especially as film artists or theater artists, I think we have that little voice in our head that we, especially being trained, where we're constantly critiquing ourselves. We're constantly looking over our own shoulder saying, oh, well, you could have been more in the moment here. Or you should do this, or you're trying, what's my objective? What's my, whatever that may be. And there's always this phrase of you do the work, and then when you get in the room, you throw it away. And I always felt like that was totally impossible. I was always like, what do you mean? No, what I've been working on is going to be hanging over my head. But I think stretching the muscle of the little kid on the playground who pretends to fight the dragon. That's what all of us started as at some point in our lives. We've all been the little kid with the stick in our hand pretending to fight the dragon. And so being able to stretch that muscle again and pour into that and be like, okay, so how do I get back to that state of just freedom, just free play? She always talks about how calls people playmates, and I love that. That's one of my favorite things that she will say when we're in a collaborative space is oh, hey, playmates, or let's do something, playmates, or whatever it may be, because it takes us back. It shocks us back to our playground days, which in an essence, that's what we get to do as actors, especially, and as theater makers, is we're just playing pretend. That's true, and it's awesome. I love that.
And it's important. There are things that we've known forever that now, because we have things like MRI machines, neurology is sort of proving, quote unquote, but people knew for a long time, and the importance of play and creativity. And like you say, Rachel, everyone is creative, but it is something that can lie dormant.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
And play is, I believe, essential for happiness and for thriving. And devising is just one other way to get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
And because we're adults, what's genius about devising is there are rules and there are exercises. Because Brian first said to me when I was I cast these people, and he didn't tell me I needed to cast devisers. He's like, what? So we did take the first part. Most of the rehearsal process was teaching y'all the language of devising. And I think that's great for adults because it isn't just like kids. It isn't just like, oh, you have an hour, go outside and play.
Right.
It is like, okay, no, here's some rules because adults
Right.
like rules. It's
Yeah.
a place to start. It's not a
Totally.
completely blank page.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I love that he was like, wait, who did you bring in for this?
You did what now? Yeah.
Okay, so I do want to go back a little bit because in your bio, I mean, you do so many things, Kimberly. You're primarily an actress, but then you write, and not just for stage, but you've written for screen and you've written books, so many different things. You coach. So take me back to what got you into the arts.
When I was 3 years old, I told my mom I wanted to pretend for a living.
Wow.
Well,
That you were like, here it is.
Here it is. And I sometimes have gone on like talk shows or podcasts and felt a little bit, I guess, bad about that because you'll listen to other actors and they'll be like, oh, it was this director or was this, and it feels very outside of them, like they were inspired by the art itself. And mine can almost feel to me sort of self-absorbed because I'm like, no, see, I like to physically do things. Like I am an actress in every sense of the word.
sure, yeah.
I am, in some ways I'm fascinated with human behavior and how to replicate it in believable ways. But then even above that, just how to use the whole of my humanity. I love physical exertion and using your voice. And so when I was little, it wasn't about, I can't point to things that were like, oh, this inspired me, or I loved this person's work.
Yeah.
Even though I do love stories, I am a storyteller, I do love narrative, but really it was, so that moment, and I still remember it very clearly, my mom let me, you know how you have like little pretend chores?
Yeah.
So I was dusting, right? And so my parents never pushed education in a really heavy-handed way, but my mom did teach us all to read when we were 2. So we kind of had that part of the world was opened up to us.
Right.
So I'd now been reading for a year, right? I was 3.
Yeah.
I was like a seasoned reader. And I was dusting, which I'm sure someone had to come and do it again.
Sure.
But I'm dusting and I'm doing a little commercial in my head. And I say, for a complete shine, use, and I start to, and I'm looking forward like the camera. And I realize that I'm not holding, it doesn't feel like the pledge bottle that I'm used to. So I'm like, oh no, what's the name of the product? And so I look at it like in character, you know, like I'm like, for a complete shine, use. And the name of it was called Complete. So it's like, for a complete shine, use. And I was like, complete. And then I was like, I am, and I wasn't like a super haughty kid.
Yeah.
I was just like, clearly God made me to pretend.
Yeah.
Like this is that one little
moment.
tiny moment. And then I was
love
like, went to
that.
my mom, like, Mama, I am going to pretend for a living. She's like, really? I was like, yes, that's going to be my job.
Oh my gosh.
And
I love that.
And then as I was, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7, I really loved, if I was super happy, to try to make myself cry, or I recognized that I was a pretty, pretty feminine mover. So I would try to, act like more like a boy, move like that.
Right.
And this didn't even always happen with other people. A lot of this was alone, but it was just so much about what I wanted to experience in my own body.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool.
So you started out acting. Did you start working professionally at a young age?
I did kind of, so, but also not. So my parents, in fact, no one thought I was going to be a professional actress because I'm also kind of a brainy girl. So they, and there were certain things like I was really great at science and I hated science, but I wasn't a complainer. So no one knew that. I had this thing where I loved math and I loved literature, but I didn't trust science and history because I felt like they pretended to be math, but they were actually literature. It's like, oh, how do we know this history, this science? This is not 2 + 2 is 4.
Right,
and they're acting like it is, and this is irritating to me.
Yeah.
But though I may have been irritated inside, I wouldn't really express that. And so I remember when I graduated from my high school, they were super disappointed because I was their valedictorian and they liked their valedictorian, and I had gotten a bunch of scholarships to like big science schools and things like that. And I was like, no, I'm going to be a theater major.
Right.
And the principal told me I should whip myself with a wet noodle. They were really upset. And even my parents were like, oh, really? Oh, like they were like, fine.
Right.
They're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But I had already been doing, I started doing voiceovers. So I did a lot of, as you heard from my bio, I did a lot of anime and other kind of voices when I was really young. But I don't think people thought that was just like instead of working at the Gap, you know?
Sure, yeah. Totally.
Oh my gosh. So then when
I had a private life. I was very private, I think. Super private when I was a kid. And so there was all this stuff going on inside of my private life.
Yeah.
And I think I just assumed people knew that about me.
Totally,
and then to realize, wait.
Yeah.
You guys don't know this?
You don't know this? But
Right.
I mean, I was in drama, and I was like, you know, went to competitions every weekend, and but they just thought I was gonna. I mean, my dad really thought I was gonna be a pediatrician, and I'm like, that is so specific, a pediatrician,
Right, exactly.
Well, you're really great with kids, and I was like, no, like what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to spit when I heard the word blood.
Yeah.
So like, what?
Where are you going with this,
What?
Dad?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then when did writing become part of your creative life?
Always and never. So writing is one of those things that I have to grapple with a lot. So I think I started writing really young and winning things really young, but I went to a private school where we had to be out. Well, I shouldn't say had to, but there was a feeling, there's a lot of money being raised all the time, right? So it was, I don't want to say I was paraded about, that sounds negative, but it was a little bit like, go to this speech competition, go to the Optimist Club, go to the, so it felt like and maybe they were just also making things available to us. And maybe I also just as a kid felt like the need to participate.
Sure.
And so there would be a slot and I would fill it. Like, we need someone to write a short story. And then it would go to a national competition and then I would win. And it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I never have enjoyed writing because I like working in a group. I don't like solitary creation. What wasn't in my bio was that I designed clothes right out of school for a while.
Way.
Whoa.
And that was a funny thing where I really loved that atmosphere of working a little bit alone inside of a bigger context where you have a trim person and a colorist and a merchandiser and all of that kind of stuff. And so writing, like when I wrote the book, which was commissioned, I had an editor, but mostly that was like the worst period of my life writing that book. Like I was just like, I am miserable. And so there's a lot of people, including my father, who always encouraged me to write. My oldest brother is a very successful writer, poet. And Ronnie L. Yates, if you want to look his stuff up.
Okay.
But I think of him as the writer, and he's also a writing teacher. So my experience with writing has really just been, I do it, well, okay. So there are things that we want from the world. And there are things that the world wants from us. And I think there's a place where they intersect. If you think of a diagram of like two circles.
Sure.
And I sometimes think the sweet spot is there. And I think sometimes if we stubbornly stay where the world doesn't want us, like if I wanted to be a professional basketball player and I just kept staying with that and the world just doesn't really want that from me. That's an issue. And then there are some things the world might want from me, like maybe some parts of the world might be interested in me being a prostitute. And I'm just not down with that at all. But I think sometimes if I were to stubbornly stick with wanting to be a basketball player, I might have to end up in a version of prostitution. I might end up doing something else that the world wanted from me that I really, really didn't want to do. That's a pretty blue example I just gave. But
No, that makes sense though.
But somewhere in the middle. So where writing comes in for me is sometimes guilt. Sometimes like, oh, you're so good at this. You're so good at this. Like, I think, I work with N.T. Wright and he's really encouraging of me as a writer. Oh, you're a writer. And I help him edit some of his lectures and that kind of thing. Yeah. And I really love, and when I just finished my thesis, I mean, people are always saying, oh, you should write. But I really loathe the process.
Totally.
And also just because I'm bored of being in my own brain. Like, I already know what's there.
Yeah.
You know, I want to know what's in your brain and what's in your brain, because that's the adventure. That's like the unknown territory.
Totally.
And so part of it is guilt, and part of it, because I do think I have a facility for it. But then part of it, the way I kind of make the two circles intersect, is creating opportunity for myself. So almost everything that I have written has been a vehicle for my actress.
Yeah.
Or something for a vehicle for my faith.
Right.
A lot of it has also, or all of it has been for finances, right? Like it's the sort of moneymaker. And I'll tell myself, well, this is the best waiting tables job ever.
Right.
You know,
Totally.
that kind of thing. So in fact, it's funny. I coach a lot of what I'd call crossover clients, like people who are writers on big talk shows or big television shows that want to become actors, or maybe they're singers or rappers and they want to become actors, or they're musicians. Shout out to CAA, who sends me all my clients. They're fantastic to work with.
Yeah.
And there's one, I have NDAs for all this stuff, so I have to be so careful about what I say. But there's one person that I have who has an amazing job. In fact, I have so many writers, I can just say a writer, because no one's ever going to trace which writer this is, but who writes for a big, huge television show, but is an actor by trade. And what I tell him often is, I was like, you have the best waiting tables job ever.
Yeah, truly.
You know, you have like a 6 to 7 figure waiting tables job that is also in the industry, and that is also working out those muscles. And because this is for the makers, I think you do have to be careful. My dad told me something once that was really a smart thing to say. This is when I was in high school, and I was the Alley Theater. I'm from Houston, Texas, and that's the big theater in our town. And there was an opportunity in the summer to work in the box office. And there was also a director who was around who was trying to discover me. He's a Broadway director. And he had seen me in a few things. And just, you know, my dad knew that at this point, my parents knew I wanted to be an actor. And my dad did not want me to take this job. And he said, and I was like, but I get to be at the Alley and hang around all these people. He's like, yeah, but you're in the box office. And he said, there is such a thing as the right place at the right time. And then there is such a thing to being at the right place at the right time in the wrong capacity.
Oof.
And you have to remember that when you take other jobs in your field, is actually, it might be better to wait tables than to do something in another part of the industry where people, so I don't do a lot of on-set coaching. I did it twice. And then I was like, I'm done with that, because then they only see me as a coach and not as an actor anymore. And I think you do have to be aware of that. But when I'm writing vehicles for myself, I always lead with actress and actress writer. And they know very well when I come in the room that I'm part of the package. And it does feel like writer, actress is still in a creative realm. And also, if you get too many, even if you do it all, because I've produced and I've directed, but I don't always list all that, because it starts to dilute it. People don't take you seriously.
Totally.
Yeah.
When you're like, they're like, oh, okay, I see. They're all self-produced, or, you know, you have to, and it's people should applaud that, but they don't. It's like, like the book that I wrote was published by someone else, but if I were to write writer producer, people would think it was a self-published book. And there's nothing wrong with a self-published book, but unfortunately, people have their biases.
Totally.
And so I do think you kind of have to protect just the focus of what you're trying to do. Just really focus what you're trying to do, because there's so many opportunities out there.
Yeah.
If you don't decide, I think there's a funny balance. I'm a yes person. I say yes to everything.
Totally.
And I think that's brought me on lots of adventures. But this year, my theme for the year is focus and finish. Focus on things and finish. And then as I was praying about that, this other kind of phrase came. And I don't even like alliteration. I'm like, God, why are we talking in alliteration?
Why are we doing this right now? Yeah.
But it was the word, it was the phrase, release and return. So I called my old pastor who lives in Bali, and I was like, so should I have 4 words? Should I have 1? Focus, finish, release, return, worship?
Yeah.
And she talked me through all of them. She's like, actually, I think it's all of them. I think this is how it's going to work. And it has part of the return. She was talking about the idea of repentance in the Hebrew word, which you may be familiar with, but it's about turning around, right?
Yeah.
It's like a 180 turn. And we often associate repentance with like repenting for something you've done wrong, but it's not necessarily always just that. It's you could be on a path that's leading you away from who you are, from who God created you to be. And it's this like, just turn around back 180 degrees and go back to where you were. And so I do feel like I would want to say to the makers out there, before you dilute your creative energies, think about what your goal is. There's this book that this guy, Dr. Oz, I'm trying to remember what his first name is, called 9 Things. He has the best, he wrote a book called Boundaries, which I think a lot of people know.
Yeah.
Same guy. So the 9 things, it has like a subtitle. It's like 9 things that everyone successful in love or life. I don't know, it's a long subtitle, but it's 9 things that he's kind of a coach to like big CEOs and things like that. And he talks about what are the 9 things that he noticed they all have in common to be successful. And he's like, these are not actually things to be healthy necessarily.
Sure.
But these are things that I've noticed highly successful people have. And one of them he calls pull the tooth. And he gives an example of someone who buys a corporation. I believe it's not Fortune 500 and it gets to be Fortune 500 or something like that. But he sells off 80% of the company that's making money at pennies on the dollar. And they're like, what? And he's saving what he calls the 20% gold, like the 20% best. So I would encourage makers to focus on the 20% best. It's hard to do. I know.
That's good though.
Like, yeah, that's a good way of just packaging that whole concept. I've actually been having a lot of conversations with friends very recently just about that focus and about the side hustles that we have to do as creative people, and how it can be so tempting it can be very tempting to suddenly be going after the adjacent thing that you actually want to be doing. So like, I mean, for example, like I've been thinking about dramaturgy recently. It's something I'm super interested in, but then I also will think like, okay, am I thinking about that because I like writing? Like, is that the adjacent thing? And my friend Amy Helms, friend of the podcast, I don't know why we always say that. She sent me this picture this morning of this, basically this, it's the sequel to The War of Art. I almost said The Art of War. Yikes. The War of Art.
Not the same.
Yeah. And I can't remember what the sequel is, but it's that whole concept of like focus on the 20%. Like that's so good. And I think after time, we have to remind ourselves of that like every once in a while, because as time goes on, it can just be so easy to like be so spread thin that we're not actually doing the things, or that we're not actually putting our energy toward the things that we want to be doing. Have you found that to be like difficult in your own life?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why my bio looks like it does in some ways. I think the clearest example for me was designing clothes, because I also think maybe a lot of performers feel this way, but we're pretty present people. Like I'm always in the nanosecond, and I actually can be very happy doing a lot of things, quite joyful. So suddenly when I graduate from school and I pop into, and that's a whole story that is just how I ended up not going to fashion school, and I'm suddenly an assistant designer for 2 weeks, and then an associate designer for 6 months, and then a designer for, huge name brands. And I'm like, and my sell-throughs are insane. It's, how did that, there's something, I guess maybe the since we're in Lent, we can focus on like the pride part of me. It's like, you know, in New York, everyone I knew was an actor. Yeah. But and suddenly I'm like, oh, I'm a designer now. I'm sending, like you said you want to talk about Jim Parsons, or like I'm sending Jim Parsons and Bradley Cooper free jeans, and I'm like, guys, I'm designing.
Right.
And actually, Bradley was one of the few people brave enough we were at some opening night party, and he saw me. He's like, wait, so you're designing now? And he's like, oh, did you do that dress? And he's talking about it. He's like, wow, that's great. And he's like, used an expletive. He's like, what the blank are you doing? You're an actress. And it was like, okay, there's a little bit of honesty. But I mean, I was very thankful for that because I didn't listen to him and did it for several more years.
Right.
Yeah. But it's important to have those people in your life because I think part of me, right out of school, you know, there were a lot of struggling actors, and it just seemed like, you know, this is the world I know. And and then, wow, like I'm literally walking down the street and I am seeing people wearing things that came out of my head. I mean, that's happened to me hundreds of times. You're just walking down the street and you're like, wow, I remember the moment I thought of that and why I thought of that. Yeah. And it feels very cool. And then, you know, you're getting paid and you're going, and I love color, and I draw. Like I grew up, there's a funny thing. I won a drawing contest in 2nd grade, and then I was like, never going to draw again because done. I've just
did it.
Done that.
Yeah.
And then
made it.
And then in acting school, I made it. And then in acting school, we had to have a semester of painting, and the painting teacher, when we had like at the end of the semester, when all the teachers get together and give you feedback, she was like, you need to stop being an actress and you need to be a painter. And the head of the program was like, no, what are you saying? No, stop doing that. And so I kind of prayed for an opportunity to draw or to paint because it was something that I'd left dormant, except those 2 tiny periods in my life. So then when I got to be a designer, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm drawing all the time. Right. I'm getting to use this skill. And so I do think things can be wrapped around. That was a very helpful time for me because I got to work corporate, so I have more to act from. Like I know how the other half lives. Sure. As a producer, when you raise money, I know when people give you money, they're giving you their time. And I know how costly that is. And just having the experience that so many people have in America of working for a corporation. So I am thankful for it, but I stayed in it too long. And it sucked me in because it was a cool job. It was a fun job. It was a creative job. But it wasn't the core, like talking about repenting, releasing, and returning of who Kimberly was. Yeah. Right. It wasn't that pretend, that play, that physical exertion, the being great with language. My whole world was visual when I was a designer.
Yeah. Wow. It's really this whole concept of focusing on the 20%, focusing on the thing, like the gold. Whenever you said, oh, well, it was an enticing job. It made me money. It was, all of these things. On the outside, it's like, yeah, take that job. Like that job is great. But in waiting for the 20%, digging up the 20%, holding up the 20%, cherishing the 20% is really hard. It's not easy. It's not something that all of us are sitting here in this circle being like, and it was so easy. Like, no, like it's a hard thing to do. But it's so worth it. It's hard, but I think the other thing is harder actually. I think sometimes
choose your hard.
Yeah, choose your hard.
Yeah. Is I wonder if we were to lean, maybe not the word easy, but if we were to lean into the ease. You know what I mean? The stuff that for one thing, when you dilute it, you end up so when I was designing, people still kept asking me to be in projects, right? So here I have this 80-hour-a-week job, and I'm working, and I'm volunteering for a church 40 hours, and then I'm sleeping very little, and then I'm in the occasional music video or the occasional Fringe Festival show or all that stuff. And because I couldn't get acting out of my life, even if I tried. And so suddenly I'm going in a gazillion different directions, which all keep me in this adrenaline junkie phase, this adrenaline cycle. And just this week, I made myself I made myself reprioritize. I like to get done with the administrative stuff first, like the busy. And then I used to do this when I designed. Like when everyone went home, I'd lock myself in the brand room. Like I'd start with like emails and all that stuff. And then I'd be there at work till 3 o'clock in the morning because I'm a night owl.
Yeah.
No, really, I'm more of a vampire than a night owl. Really. And that's when I would want to draw and create. And I've tried to switch that because as life has gone on, I never get to the drawing and creating anymore. I always stay. So like with La Joie, I was never off book. I was like everyone else. I as the actress, like, cause I'm also in the show.
Right.
Yeah. I'm doing all the other stuff. And then I'm like, oh, right. I have to
be an actor. Yeah.
I'm pretty fast on the uptake. Like I think I would step in and kind of, but I don't really get to, I love rehearsal.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love swimming in that. And so this week I made myself go to the dance class in the morning instead of the evening class. Made myself at auditions that aren't due till next Monday. Like yesterday, before I answered even your email back, I made myself sit with half an hour each with these 2 different scripts and just do the fun stuff. And I let myself, vocal warm-ups have ended up being like once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks instead of every day. And I was like, I just want to sing. I'm going to let myself. And so I had this whole like 4-hour period where I just did creative stuff before I answered one email. And I was like, actually, you know what? That is where the ease is.
Totally. Yeah. That makes so much sense.
Because there's so much anxiety with the other stuff with like, okay, got to get through this. What time is it?
Yeah.
But it was hard at first to quiet myself. There was a time when I was working on one of the scripts where I started to put it down. I did put it down. I was like, I just need to get back to this one. I know I have a text. Wait. And then I was like, nope.
Yeah.
It's hard to still yourself enough to get to that creative place. But once I let myself, I was like, oh, thank you, God. This is me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of the whole, like, you have to fill up to pour out situation. And it's like, sometimes the sending the emails, those things are like, because they're not creative, because they're not filling. It is like the pouring out, right? So it's like, if you put the things that you're created to do first, they fill you up. And then I'm sure it's easier then to sit down and reply to emails because you're like, oh, I'm feeling, I got in, my creative juices are flowing and now I feel like I can send this email instead of being like, oh my gosh, I've slugged myself through this whole day and now I have to sit down and send all these emails. And then, because then I'm this way. If I sit down and I've worked all day or I've done whatever, but I know I have an audition to film or I have a script to read or I have a concept presentation to get done, those are all those are the goods, right? But I sit down to send emails and then all of a sudden I've spent 4 hours sending emails and then I'm exhausted. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go, but I guess I'm going to sleep. I'm not working on anything creative today. And it's like, that's such good advice to flip that.
And you forget, you stop being good at it. Right. It starts, the emails start to feel more fulfilling because it's checking things off of your list.
Totally. Yeah. Yep. I know. Spicy.
Ooh, yeah. No, that's good. Okay. Kimberly, why do you think the arts are important?
My thesis actually weirdly dealt with this. I was talking about knowing, like epistemology, like how do we know things and how does art figure in with that? And what's interesting about art is it's rational and beyond rationality. It's both. And to be able to operate on that plane is really important. It's holistic. I think art is holistic. I think art is a lot of times the good stuff. It's not the we think it's not the survival stuff, but it's like, what are we living for?
Right.
And I think what's also great about art is we get to dance with the truth without really being obsessed with the facts, right? Like art doesn't have to answer questions. It gets to ask questions. Yeah. Art's a place where you can you don't have to wrap everything up in a neat little bow. Sure. Like with a lot of life. It's not tied to a certain kind of productivity. It's not tied to things like healing people medically, or, there's not it can be a little more amorphous.
Sure.
And I think the most important thing, play, like we talked about.
Yeah.
Even watching a play can be, or watching a movie is playful in a sense, and also beauty, right? It's just like beauty for beauty's sake. One time I was walking with my friend David, who works at the Federal Reserve Bank, and I was asking him about how to price a certain, we're freelancers, and it was a writing thing, and it was like, well, how do I price this? And so he was talking me through it. I still remember we were on 47th and 10th Avenue, walking away from this wonderful restaurant in Yeho. We just had fish tacos, and he was talking about like a formula, like how to, and then he threw out as if everyone knew this, like the banker threw out, well, because you as artists explain to the rest of us how to live, so blah 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 blah. And I was like, wait, what?
Oh my gosh.
Back up. He's like, you explain life to us, like, and I was like, we do.
What do we do? Yeah.
What do we do? And I don't think we explain it so much as an explanation, but that we explore it and we give people permission to explore it. Because I think really good art is never about itself and never about the story. If you're giving, for instance, let's talk about acting. If you're giving a great performance, someone's not going to think about you being a great actor. They're going to think about the story. But I think if it's a really fantastic work of art, they're not even thinking about the story. They're thinking about themselves.
Right.
How it relates to them. Same thing if you see a painting, anything.
Yeah.
How it brings them back to them. And we don't tell people, audiences, what to think.
Right.
We lead them to water, and then it's their decision whether or not they want to drink and what they want to drink. One thing that was really hard for me being in it was a pre-PhD program that I was in, and so it was academic I have another master's in acting, but this was like an academic master's. And it was so tricky to be in that world because they want you to write everything like 10 times. They'd be like, Kimberly, you need to say this again. I was like, I've already said it 7 times.
Right.
And because they want you to drive it home. And I said, in my world, we say things half a time.
Right.
You don't even say it all the way. You say it half a time,
point.
and then you let the other, because you don't want to paint in crayons, right? And so I think art is truly a conversation where, and it doesn't have to be charged. You can have a political conversation, you can have a familial conversation, you can have a historical conversation, but you're just offering your half of your, you're saying it halfway, and the audience is meeting you and seeing where they're where they are in that process.
Right.
That's beautiful.
I know, it's so good. I'm like, my brain is like, whoa. Like I'm reeling a little bit.
You really do have a great way of like explaining these things in a way that I think we feel, but don't necessarily know how to put to words sometimes.
Totally.
So thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's why people always tell me to be an actor. I mean, to be a writer.
Right, exactly. You're like, no, but I'm an actor.
I finally explained it to my dad. My dad, super decorated police officer. There's a civic holiday named after him in Houston, Texas, January 29th. And he's really great at a lot of things. But on the down low, I'm going to tell a secret. At home, my mom's always like, you're not Captain Yates when you walk in the door. You're not the captain of anything. He's the stain master.
Nice.
He can get any stain out of anything. It's like I literally bring things home, like the cleaners can't get out and bring it home. Yeah, and he'll ask different questions like, okay, so how much can I ruin this? Like, how far can I go? Yeah. Like, is it gone? And he's amazing. And so much so that my niece, she didn't know it was Papa. She brought something over the other day, and she's like, Grandma, can you take this to the stain master for me? She's like, oh, well, just go give it to Papa. And she thought it was a business.
No, that's so funny.
So she's like, wait, Papa's been the stain master all this time?
Gosh, that's so funny.
That's adorable.
Yeah, it was really adorable. So we were talking one day, this was during COVID, and he was saying, I was there at their house, and we were out in the backyard, and we were around a table, and he was just like, I really think you should be writing more, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, he kept saying, you're just so good at it. You just have such a way of expressing things with words. And I said, yeah, but just because you're good at something, he's like, no, if you're good at something. And I was like, hey, Dad, how would you feel about being stain master for a living?
Yeah, exactly.
And he got super quiet, and he was like,
Touche.
Yeah.
So he hasn't been bothering me for the past almost 3 years.
Yeah, totally.
I'm glad that you had that up in your brain.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
just be able to play that card.
Exactly. What you've been saying about, or what you said about, the things that we live for, art is something that we live for. A couple of people have said that since we've been recording, and it just brings me back. I asked these questions that we've been asking on our podcast to a couple of my coworkers the other day, because I wanted to see what their reactions would be. And one of the questions we get to is like, what film or book or play or whatever do you think everybody should watch? And one of my friends, she said The Dead Poets Society. And I love that film so much. But he almost says that verbatim, Robin Williams does, when he gathers all the boys around in the classroom. And there's this one scene where he describes all these different occupations. He's like, the scientist, the lawyer, the medical professional. He's like, all of these things are good and right and beautiful in their own place. But he says art, beauty, poetry, literature, like stories, these are the things we live for. And I just feel like as artists ourselves, that is it's just it gives weight to what we do in a different way. And to see that, like, your friend who's a banker recognizes that and sees that as important is really cool, especially when we've come from a time when we didn't even know if our industry was going to exist in the same way or how we were going to get through the pandemic. But the importance of art has sustained through that.
And the realization of that is what helps us stick with the 20%.
Totally.
I think what makes us move away from the 20% is we forget that what we're offering is a value. So you were saying, you were talking about, LB, you were talking about how, if you do the things that fill you up more, you can pour out.
Yeah.
And I was actually thinking, that's not about filling me up, just about filling me up. Actually, that is pouring out.
Yeah.
That it's not like, if I go to a dance class, that is like, no, the dance, that is valuable. And sometimes because as artists, the way the business is structured, we do a lot of what we do for free.
Totally.
I feel like my career has been like, super big ticket items and then free. Like I do everything. I make an absurd amount of money for like one day of work so that I can do a play downtown for like subway fare for 3 months. Right. Yeah. And that can make you forget, especially in a capitalistic society, right? That can make you forget the value. And so you do think, oh no, the emails are being more productive. And to know that it takes time to build things. Yeah. So of course we can all think, I do a beautiful performance, that's valuable because people see it, but I'm sitting in my living room and I'm working on a script. Well, that's just for me. No. That's like the inventor in the, that's part of the process. Like you're kind of getting paid, so to speak, or your value is for the whole process, not just the finished product. And that's, I think, what ties you when you're like, okay, if writing is your gold or whatever, like and you're getting sidetracked to dramaturgy, which maybe that is part of it, but it is good to say yes and dabble for a while and look and experiment, but remembering what I write is valuable, what they're going to read. But all the drafts that they don't read are still valuable because that's necessary to get to the gold.
Right. Absolutely.
You talk about that. Go ahead.
I know. I was going to say this. I talk about this all the time. I went to an exhibit at the Met a couple years ago now. And it was Michelangelo's basically like lost drawings because he was so concerned about people only knowing him for his final products that he would burn all of his practice sketches. And so this exhibit was like some of the only found sketches that we have from Michelangelo.
Wow.
And I was just thinking about that, like how, like we now, like his sketches that he was trying to get rid of are in the Met
museum.
yeah. And it's just kind of like how valuable those are to us. And yeah, I just think that the process is so, the process is valuable because that's the only way that the final product is going to happen.
Right.
And we can get so hard on ourselves sometimes about the mistakes or the, you know, the second draft or the whatever we're on, that we forget, like, this is how you get to the final product. And even the final product, once you're finished with it, is you're going to look back someday and feel like it's not good anymore because you've continued to do your art and you continue to get better, and you're going to think, oh my goodness, but that's what it is, you know?
I believe Hamilton took 7 years to write.
Yeah.
Yeah, so long.
So long.
Well, and the first time he performed one of the songs, people laughed at him.
Yeah.
You can go on to YouTube and watch. There's a video of Lin-Manuel Miranda doing one of the raps. I'm not 100% sure.
Was it the
which
Aaron
one it
Burr
is.
one that he did uptown?
Maybe it is, but he
Like on the steps of some building or something?
yeah, and he literally, you can hear people in the video like cackling.
Wow.
And now I'm like, they're not laughing now.
Well, and that's such a good example because that piece is so complex. It is so intertwined. There's so many callbacks.
Yeah.
Like you can just see like how did he even begin to build this?
Right.
You can see it can't just come out linearly, right? It's going to be stop and start in it because and the finished product is so cohesive,
Right.
Because it's so complex,
Right.
Yeah.
which
Without a
takes
doubt.
time.
It's
Totally.
so true. Okay. Should
Rapid
we do
fire?
some rapid
Rapid
fire?
fire, let's do
Yeah,
it.
for the end to finish it off. Okay, so the third question is, what keeps you grounded as a human?
Oh gosh, so I think the true answer to that is who says I'm grounded as a human? Not
Fair. That is so fair.
But I mean, I will.
feel that on a
I can
spiritual
tell you.
level.
I suppose. Yeah. I don't know that I'm particularly grounded, but what keeps me, what gets me closest to it is, I would say, physical activity and other humans.
Yeah.
And I think those two things, physical exertion and other humans, are the way I approach God. That's what gets me closer to God. Because ultimately, I guess the divine is the only thing that teaches me how to be human.
Yeah.
But we all get to the divine certain ways, and I have to do that in community and through movement.
Totally. Great answer.
Yeah.
So for question 4, what person, place, or experience has shaped you the most creatively?
Wait, what was question 2?
Question 2 is
Why do you think art
the
is
artist-
important?
okay.
Yeah.
What person, place, or can you just say that again?
Yeah, of course. What person, place, or experience has shaped you the most creatively?
I hate to be the difficult one who doesn't answer any of the questions.
No, it's great.
That's hard to say. I mean, in some ways, wow, I'm literally going to say this myself.
Yeah.
I think we all like returning back to sort of going out into the world, absorbing it, and then coming back and percolating on it.
Totally.
But I guess, my brothers and my first boyfriend, my first boyfriend who I dated well into adulthood, is a professional actor and also a musician. And my oldest brother's a poet, my brothers are musicians. And so I think and all their friends hanging around, because I'm the baby by a lot.
Sure.
And so, boys, I think boys, like rambunctious high school, college boys, just jamming out with each other.
Yeah.
That in some ways, and what they introduced me to. So, there was 2 ends of the spectrum. So I definitely think my brothers were more kind of heavy metal and avant-garde poetry.
Totally.
And philosophy and church boys. And then my boyfriend, he was had professional actor parents, his mom was a ballerina and his dad was a Shakespearean actor. And so I think if I look back in my life, it's always opposites.
Yeah.
Come together, like Ozzy Osbourne and like Stephen Sondheim, and how they exploded in my like 13, 14-year-old brain. That kind of thing.
Wow, I love that.
That's
also,
so cool.
I wish we could get that that duo, Ozzy Osbourne and Stephen Sondheim. I'd be here for it.
Yeah.
They would probably kill each other. they have they're such like individuals in their own right. I wonder how that would mix. But
I know.
Last question is, what book, play, or film do you think every person should watch or read?
Oh my gosh, I'm going to be difficult again.
Do it.
Please.
Because we're all so individual that whatever speaks to me might not speak to you.
Yeah.
I would say, from my perspective, things that have spoken to me, I think maybe sacred literature, ancient sacred literature, is something that everyone should maybe force themselves to grapple with, whether it be something from the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament or the Quran or the Gita Govinda, or just something that's ancient, because, we all have literally a blind spot. Right. You can test it with that little black circle, that you put your eye. Yep. We have a blind spot. And they say something like when you walk down the street, you're only seeing like 20% of things accurately. Like
that's crazy.
Like that girl over there walking her dog really just has a long fuzzy purse. And because your brain wants to be really efficient, and it wants to kind of get you through your day. And so if we're all so limited, then if I'm only seeing 20% of what's in this room accurately, then I want other people in the room sitting in a different position with a different blind spot. And if everyone in my room is from the 21st century, that's not enough different blind spots. I think ancient literature gets us, out, is the closest thing we have to getting us out of our, inviting other people to our party.
Totally.
To our room. And I would also say, though, a thing that I think this ties into what's important about art. I was watching To Kill a Mockingbird, Aaron Sorkin's version.
So good.
It's so good. It was like I was standing room only. I was standing back there. I had a boot on my foot. And I thought I was going to be able to sit down, because you can always sit down because, corporations buy a bunch of seats. But that was the only thing where there was a person in every seat. Like, that never happens.
Wow.
And in that run, that happened. And I wasn't that familiar with the movie or the book. I know his adaptation was controversial in some ways. I thought it was really timely and perfect for us. But when I watched To Kill a Mockingbird, I had been actually asking about a certain question in my life, which is, I am a person that's full of a lot of grace. And I was like, God, where's there room for justice? Like, I don't get that. I am always like, well, I know he raped her, but, I'm that person. And watching that play and the journey that Atticus goes on answered that question. Yeah. And I turned to my friend as soon as the curtain went down, I said, a good story on its feet can do in 2 hours what a politician, a teacher, a therapist, or a preacher can't do in 10 years. And it's not that
Wow.
It's not that that the teacher, the politician, the therapist, or the preacher are not important. Because in certain ways, they do more intricate things that do take 10. Policy is important. The therapist helping you work through it. But a good story on its feet it lights so fast. Yeah. It opens up a door in you that was slammed shut before. And makes room for the politicians and the teachers and the preachers and the therapists to do their work. Right. So I guess for me, that version of To Kill a Mockingbird did that for me. And I hope everyone finds that for them. And it doesn't just happen once in your life. Right. Much Ado About Nothing did that for me, Kenneth Branagh's version, when I was a kid. And then Junebug did that again. Right. And then, The Fighter did it again. And so I would say, those are my, Secret Life of Walter Mitty did it in a certain way. Yeah. So I would say, challenge yourself. Make yourself, don't just watch the movies that you like. Because another thing I forgot to say when you talked about what's important about art. So I'm mostly known for my comedy. And I think that sometimes that laughing is one of the most healing things that can happen. So as makers, I would say adding playfulness and adding humor to everything you do. But as audience members, when you say, like, what's an important thing everyone should watch, whatever it is you're watching, look for the fun.
Yeah.
Look for the smiles. Look for the danger or the mischief.
Yeah.
And look for the big things and note what it's doing to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That I'm going to stitch that on a pillow. That, like, a good play, you know, up on its feet can do what it's, tattoo that on my arm and like stitch that on a pillow, like on my forehead maybe, so everybody can read it. It's just brilliant. It's so good.
I know. Oh my gosh. Kimberly, we're so honored that you spent time with us today. Thank you so much. Truly. This was... there are so many nuggets from this
I know
that I'm going to be like, I'm going to have to listen to this
my own podcast
5 times. Yeah, exactly. But before we wrap up, we talked about Le Joie, but I just want to give you an opportunity if there's other creative things that you want to share that you've been working on or that people should look out for, and also to share your socials. I can read them too. But
sure. So I'm really passionate about bringing this play to people who aren't artists, just artists. So Brian Reinhardt, who you know, and I are talking about, we're working on some retreats and workshops for, obviously actors and people like that can come, but for other people to play in this devised work.
Yeah, I love that.
So I guess follow my socials, follow particularly my Instagram and Le Joie's Instagram, so that you can be aware of that. And what else? I feel like there's so many. We're always doing so many things.
You're doing the Comic Cons and...
Oh yeah, come see me at. So I'm doing Annapolis Con next, and Con Alt Delete, and Anime Midwest. But if you follow my socials, I'll put that on there. So come see me in Minneapolis and Chicago. You can watch my TED Talk. I would love that.
Yeah,
we're definitely going to link that in our podcast description.
Yeah, totally.
I think Ted has that on YouTube, and just follow me and follow Play La Joie, because I will actually put this out there. One of the things that we're doing is trying to develop La Joie, the play. And so since you're a bunch of makers out there, constantly looking for, people with lighting creators and sound creators, but also producers, which is a very creative thing. We need a lot of people to help us get this project off the ground and bring this story. We didn't talk about the subject matter of it, but it is, it's called La Joie, a play about suffering. La Joie is the French word for joy, which is also the name of the Chagall painting. But, I feel like my crusade is to bring joy, is to fight for, I think living joyfully is a fierce occupation.
Totally.
And it's to fight for joy. But in order to do that, you have to realize, people die, they get terrible diagnoses, they get injuries, they get hurt from each other, there is war, and the joy happens in the midst of suffering. And that's a message, not just and the play is not preachy. The play is just, we're following a couple of characters through their joy in the midst of insane sorrow and insane joy, and all mixed up into one. And as humans, how do we grapple with that? And I don't have the answer for that. I'm looking for it. That's why I wrote the play, is because I'm looking for the answer. And so follow me on socials, and then come help me find the answer to this. Yeah. That's really what I would love, because this is to makers.
Right.
And I'm looking for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Totally. Wow, you guys.
You heard it.
You did.
Okay, so your Instagram is at Kimberly Yates. No E.
I know. No ES. I should not have let them do that to me. But now is it too late to change? And it's 2 Y's, so it's totally confusing. KIMBERLYYAT.
Yeah. No, I like it. And then La Joie is at Play La Joie.
Yes.
And La Joie is LA space JOIE. We'll link that in the podcast.
Yeah, we'll link it.
Because on Instagram, it's no spaces, right? It's just play LAJOIE.
Oh, right. Yeah. There would be no space, but you can just blame it on Chagall.
And blame it on Chagall. And I mean, just to be like anyone who ever wants to look at my IMDb, I have a bunch of meetings coming up, and that is always helpful if that number goes up.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, without a doubt.
We'll do some clicking.
Totally.
Okay. I mean, we're just helping each other out, right? It's a Make
we're
This
out here.
podcast.
That's what it's for.
Exactly. That is literally what this is for.
Yep.
I was telling them that recently on my bio, I added names that I have always been really protective of not being a name dropper. And I've actually felt a freedom in that lately where I was like, no, the people who I know won't mind, who I don't have any negative stories to tell about, I'm going to put that there. And part of what it's been so great being asked to come on this podcast for, kind of the insiders
right
is talking to LB and Rachel just about how to have ownership of who we are and what we've done in a way that's not icky and gross and creepy.
Right.
And so this is kind of an experiment for me. Like, I've always been so locked down, again, because I have a lot of non-disclosure agreements with my coaching, but I've always been so protective and like not wanting to be, braggy, right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that y'all are celebrating, coming on here and asking us, well, what have you done and what do you think and how does it work? Yeah. And for my process in my life, like this is I've done so many podcasts and talk shows, and this is the first one I've ever sat down and thrown out names and had a bio as thorough as the one I gave you. And so I just thank y'all for that opportunity. And if it is creepy or gross, edit it out or give us some feedback, because this is just an experiment.
Oh my gosh, life is a big experiment.
Yeah, truly. And we love being, one of our goals was to be able to create a space in which artists can just feel free to tell their story, whatever that may look like, however big, however small, because other artists can relate to that, because we're all in this together.
Exactly.
So being able to, we just thank you for being honest, for being open, for sharing your wisdom. We'd love to have you back because we could talk for another, I'm sure, like 2 days straight. But we love you, Kimberly. Thank you so much for being here.
I love y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the For the Makers podcast. There are a few ways you can engage with us. Join our team of dreamers on Patreon for exclusive content you can't get anywhere else.
To get updates and find out more about Seated Productions, you can find us on Instagram @seated.productions or visit our website at www.seatedproductions.com. Until next time, listen well
and tell stories.